Every Call of Duty has its fans. Some people love Black Ops 2, some swear by Modern Warfare 2. Even Infinite Warfare has players who still defend it. But there's one game that constantly shows up whenever people ask one simple question: what is the worst Call of Duty ever made? Today we're diving into the game that many players believe nearly pushed Call of Duty to its breaking point. A game that launched with huge expectations and quickly became one of the most criticized entries in franchise history. But here's the real question: did Vanguard actually deserve all the hate? Or did the community go too far? Let's find out. Before we can understand why Vanguard failed, we need to understand just how high the expectations were. For over a decade, Call of Duty wasn't just popular, it dominated gaming. Every November felt like an event. Friends skipped school, people lined up outside of GameStop at midnight, millions of players jumped online on launch day. Games like Modern Warfare 2, Black Ops, Modern Warfare 3, and even Black Ops 2 became legendary. These weren't just shooters, they defined an entire generation of multiplayer gaming. Every year seemed to raise the bar. Kill streaks, campaigns, zombies, competitive multiplayer. Call of Duty felt unstoppable. Even when the franchise experimented with futuristic movements, players always believed the next game could bring things back. Then, World War II returned. When Vanguard was first announced, there was actually quite a bit of excitement. Many players hoped it would capture the magic of World at War. A gritty World War II setting, classic weapons, a darker atmosphere, and a return to boots on the ground gameplay. On paper, that sounded exactly what many fans wanted. The trailers looked cinematic, the graphics looked impressive, the marketing promised large multiplayer maps, a cinematic campaign, and a brand new zombies experience. It seemed like Call of Duty was ready for another comeback. Unfortunately, that excitement didn't last very long. When players finally got their hands on Vanguard, the cracks started to appear almost immediately. The gunplay wasn't terrible, the graphics looked alright, movement felt smooth, but something just felt off. Many maps quickly became frustrating to play, spawn issues were everywhere, weapon balancing was inconsistent, the operator system removed much of the identity players had grown to love from previous Call of Duty games. Instead of memorable factions, everyone looked almost identical. The World War II atmosphere also started to disappear. Bright cosmetics, strange bundles, and over the top skins made it harder for the game to feel authentic. For many fans, this didn't feel like the World War II experience they had been waiting for, and unfortunately, the biggest problems were still ahead. To be fair, Vanguard wasn't a complete disaster. In fact, there were moments where it generally felt fun. The movement was fast, the guns sounded powerful, and with 20 multiplayer maps available at launch, there was plenty of variety. On paper, that should have been enough. But the more people played, the more frustrating issues started to appear. One of the biggest complaints was the spawn system. You could eliminate an enemy, take two steps, and suddenly be shot in the back by someone who had just spawned in behind you. On smaller maps like Shipment, matches often turned into complete chaos. Some players loved that non-stop action, others felt it removed any sense of strategy. Map designs also became a common criticism. While a few maps stood out, many simply weren't memorable. Compare that to classics like Raid, Standoff, Nuketown, or Terminal, maps that players still talk about years later. Vanguard never really had that defining multiplayer map that people wanted to keep coming back to, and when your maps don't become memorable, players have fewer reasons to keep playing. If multiplayer disappointed some players, zombies disappointed even more. For years, Treyarch had built one of the most beloved side modes in gaming: classic round based survival, iconic wonder weapons, deep Easter eggs, memorable crews. But Vanguard launched without the traditional round based experience fans expected. Instead, players got Dur and Fang, an objective based mode that felt repetitive and lacked many of the features longtime zombies players had come to expect. There was no pack a punch grind that felt satisfying, no memorable cast of characters, very little mystery, and far less replayability. Many players finished a few matches and simply never came back. Considering how important zombies had become to Call of Duty, this was a huge disappointment. As the months went on, the conversation around Vanguard became harder and harder to ignore. YouTube creators criticized the game. Streamers moved on to other titles. Social media was filled with complaints about bugs, balancing, and the overall direction of the franchise. Even players who enjoyed parts of Vanguard admitted it struggled to hold their attention over time. The game continued receiving updates, new weapons, new maps, and seasonal content, but for many players, the damage had already been done. Once a game's reputation starts slipping, it becomes incredibly difficult to win players back. That's exactly what happened here. Instead of becoming another legendary Call of Duty, Vanguard became the game many fans pointed to whenever they're talking about the franchise losing its identity. But here's the interesting part. Was Vanguard actually the worst Call of Duty ever made? Or has the internet simply made it the easiest game to hate? That's what we're answering next. So, after everything we've talked about, does Vanguard actually deserve the title of the worst Call of Duty ever made? The answer isn't as simple as you might think, because Call of Duty has had other controversial games too. Ghost divided the community with its large maps and slower pace. Infinite Warfare faced heavy criticism before it even launched because many players were tired of the futuristic movement. And Modern Warfare 3 from 2023 received criticism for its short campaign and rushed feeling. Every one of those games has been called the worst by someone, but Vanguard stands out because it struggled in several areas at once. The World War II setting didn't feel as immersive as many players hoped. The Zombies mode launched without the classic round-based formula fans loved. Many multiplayer maps failed to become fan favorites, and despite receiving updates after launch, the game never fully escaped its negative reputation. At the same time, it's only fair to recognize that Vanguard wasn't without strengths. The movement was fast and responsive, the gunplay felt satisfying, the graphics looked good, and there are still players today who genuinely enjoy jumping into a few matches. That doesn't automatically make it a bad game. It just means expectations for Call of Duty are incredibly high. The biggest problem from Vanguard faced wasn't just bugs or maps or zombies, it was expectations. Call of Duty built a reputation over years of incredible releases. Games like Modern Warfare 2, Black Ops, and Black Ops 2 created unforgettable memories for millions of players. So when a new title launches, players don't compare it to other shooters, they compare it to the best Call of Duty games ever made. That's an incredibly difficult standard to meet. And when a game falls short, the criticism becomes much louder. That's exactly what happened with Vanguard. So, is Vanguard the worst Call of Duty ever made? In my opinion, it's definitely one of the strongest candidates. Not because every mechanic was terrible, not because it was completely unplayable, but because it never delivered on the massive expectations that surrounded it. When players think back on the greatest Call of Duty games, Vanguard is rarely part of that conversation. And that's probably its biggest problem. It wasn't unforgettable because it was amazing. It became unforgettable because of how many fans felt disappointed. But that's just my opinion. Maybe you think Ghost deserves the title. Maybe you think Infinite Warfare was worse. Or maybe you actually enjoyed Vanguard and think it gets way more hate than it deserves. That's what makes Call of Duty discussions so interesting. Everyone has a different favorite, and everyone has a different least favorite. So now I want to hear from you. What do you think is the worst Call of Duty ever made, and why? Leave your answer in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one.